Welcome to Reseller Recap, where we talk all things reselling across multiple platforms. Join us for real-life discussions on how we crush the elusive work-life balance. Grab a coffee and join us now. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're excited to welcome Corey Ganim, a dynamic 28-year-old entrepreneur who turned a corporate tech sales career at IBM into a six-figure Amazon wholesale empire. Since leaving his job in 2019, Corey has sold over $10 million worth of wholesale products, hired 30 VAs, pitched more than 3,000 suppliers, and invested $5 million into inventory. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah, the only thing that was off is I'm 30 now. So I wrote that about 2 years ago, but for the most part, you're spot on.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I've never done an intro like that. And I was like, this is professional Emily today.
Yeah, I like it.
I felt good about that. Okay. That is crazy. All that you have done so quickly. Tell us about your Amazon journey, how you got started, why you switched over to Amazon, like for the people who have not heard of you yet. Give us the play-by-play.
Yeah, definitely. So I was always kind of growing up, like kind of later in high school and then early on in college. I was always interested in flipping things. So I remember vividly, and I think it was my freshman year of college, one of my suite mates in my dorm, he had, I think it was like an iPad mini that he was just like, "Hey man, I got this for Christmas. I don't really want it. Do you want to buy it off me?" And I was like, sure. I think I gave him like $40 for it. I had no intention of flipping it. I was just like, oh, this thing's got to be worth more than $40. And so I looked it up on eBay and it was going for like 140 or 160, something like that. So I was like, oh, I might as well just sell it on eBay. And so that was really the first kind of accidental flip that I could remember. And then all throughout college, just on the side, I would be buying things. I'd specialize in video games. So older video games like Nintendo 64 and GameCube and stuff like that. So I'd buy stuff off Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or kind of wherever locally, and then flip it either back on Marketplace or on eBay. And then around my senior year of college, it's actually funny how I discovered selling on Amazon. I was abroad. I was studying abroad for a 1 month study abroad trip in January of my senior year. So this was January of 2017. And I was abroad in Vietnam. And I remember we had like a full day of just kind of relaxation. We didn't really have anything on the agenda. And I was graduating that coming May. I knew I was going to have about 2 months between graduation and when I was starting that corporate job that you mentioned. And I'm the kind of person, I'm sure you two are the same, where can't really just sit around and do nothing for 2 months. Kind of got to stay busy in some capacity. So I remember I was laying in my hotel room bed in Vietnam, looking at YouTube. And this was right around the time that Gary Vee, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with, he was talking about what he had coined the 2017 Flip Challenge. And the premise was pretty simple. He was like, listen, everybody out there's got stuff laying around their house, or they can go to a yard sale or a thrift store, and they can make an extra $2017, right, for the year 2017, just flipping stuff around their house this year. And that was kind of the challenge that he put out to the world. And so that really intrigued me because I was like, oh, I've been kind of doing this on the side. Maybe it's something I could do a little more seriously in this 2 months that I have. And so I started going down that rabbit hole. And that's what led me to discovering Reezy Resells, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with as well. He's been in the space for a long time, 10 years or more. I saw one of his YouTube videos where he was talking about going to Marshalls and going to thrift stores and buying stuff either on clearance or buying these used books for 50 cents or $1, and then turning around and flipping them on Amazon for, $10, $50. Some of these textbooks can go for an upwards of $100 plus. And that just really piqued my interest because at that point in time, I just thought that everything I bought on Amazon, I was buying from Jeff Bezos. I didn't even know third-party sellers were a thing. And I remember I just really went down the rabbit hole. I think I watched every video on his channel. I really started researching Amazon, and I just kind of made the decision. I'm like, all right, well, after graduation, this is what I'm going to do for the 2 months. I'm going to go buy used books and I'm going to flip them on Amazon. And so that's really how I got my start. And, there's a lot, of course, that happened between then and now, but that's really the quick and dirty origin story that kind of got me into the space.
So do you only sell on Amazon or do you sell on other platforms too?
So as of right now, I only sell on Amazon. So when I had started, like I had mentioned, when I was buying stuff there locally, I was doing a lot of those flips on eBay. And today I still have my eBay account. In fact, I think my eBay account was I think I made it. My mom made it for me in the year 2000. So my eBay account's
Oh,
like
wow.
25, yeah, like 25 years old. But my Amazon's the only place I sell right now. I have a Walmart account as well. I don't use it. I know Emily doesn't like that, but
Yeah, I was about to
yeah,
say why.
but I know I need to. I need to, but Amazon's my main platform.
You know what's crazy is when you're telling your story, because mine is similar, like getting on social media and seeing other people share their journey, is how impactful social media is for as much garbage as we talk about it. And,
Yep.
like,
Mm,
uh, it's not relevant and it's wrong information. Like, because same for me, it really impacted my decisions and helped steer me. Like, one 30-second reel or 10-second reel change the trajectory. And that is so powerful to think about. And you have a social media presence. And how have you combined what you do now and with social media? And I mean, because you were so influenced by it, and same, like I started on Amazon because of the same thing. I saw videos. Um, like, how do you approach social media now and relate it to your business? And is that something that's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started posting on social media in a business capacity, this would have been January of 2023, so about 2.5 years ago. And really, I started posting just with the intention of growing my network. So I was lucky enough to get featured on the Buy Box Bandits podcast, which is
mhm.
hosted by Flips for Miles and Garrett Gorel, which folks in the community probably recognize those names. And I remember after the show, Miles said to me, he's like, "Hey, you've got to start posting on Twitter. You've got to start tweeting. There's a lot of people in the Amazon community on Twitter." And I kind of just took his word for it and started posting there with the intention of growing my network, because up to that point, I could count on one hand the other Amazon sellers that I knew. There's a guy named Philip, who's now one of my good buddies, who's an 8-figure seller. And there's this guy named Jared, who I haven't talked to in years. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to take this seriously, I need to grow my network. I think the best way to do that is by posting online. And that's how it started. And ever since then, it's evolved, to be I guess, to contain multiple different uh, I guess, purposes. One being grow the audience, grow the network, grow the coaching business. And then I've landed suppliers. Some of my best suppliers actually I found through social media, and most of which have actually reached out to me directly. So that
Wow.
was a huge benefit that I wasn't expecting, that I was like, oh, there's actually more to this than just networking with other sellers.
Right. That's wild. So I mentioned, everything that you do. I mean, mentioned you are busy. How are you keeping all of this organized? Like, what's your system for sourcing, scaling? How are you moving forward
Posting,
with your business? Posting content.
marketing.
Yeah. Well, luckily I have a really good team. So kind of separated into a couple of buckets. So it's three different business entities. So the main one is the Amazon business. And so within that business, I've got two virtual assistants, one Criselda, and then the other is Ralph. And so Criselda's been with me for 5.5 years. Ralph has been with me for over 2 years. And at this point, they're just so good at Amazon as a business. They pretty much run the entire show. I mean, I have a weekly call with them to review what we're buying and our sales and all that stuff. But for the most part, Griselda handles that entire business A to Z. So I've been really blessed to have a great team there. And then on the social media side, so when it comes to posting, I do all my written content. So I send all my emails, I write all my tweets, I write all my LinkedIn posts. But then for the YouTube and really the short form content, we'll usually batch that. So we'll record it in person, or I'll record, 3 or 4 YouTube videos in one day. And then I've got an agency, my buddy Grant, who owns an agency called Integrity Media. They handle all the editing and all the posting and all the scheduling and the captions and all that stuff. So that is really, I guess, how I'm able to be everywhere at once, by having that team and that agency on the back end for the content side. And then on the coaching side, again, team there as well. So Kate, who Emily, right? Or I guess she was the first one to introduce us. She's really my right hand in that business. And we've got some other folks that help run the show there as well. But really, it all comes down to having a team. I mean, if it was just me, I wouldn't be doing nearly as much as what I'm doing today.
So me and Emily need to get some help.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the bottleneck is, but what's really helped me is just kind of identifying, well, what is it that I'm really good at? What is it that I enjoy doing? And what are the things that only I can do? And really just trying to spend as much of my time on only those things. And over the years, I think you really start to realize that there's not much that only you can do. There's stuff that, I have other people doing for me now that even a year ago, I'd be like, oh, I can never outsource that, or I have to do that. But I think over time you get better at delegating and you get better at letting go of certain things. And for me, it's almost like I delegate to a fault. I'm almost like too quick to delegate. So sometimes it's like, oh, I'll have Kate do that. I'll have Chriselle to do that. And then I realize I didn't explain it properly, or I didn't give them good instructions. And then I've got to go back and be like, wait a second, this is actually how I want it done. Maybe I need to perfect this process more before I hand it off. So sometimes I'm too quick to delegate. I think a lot of people have the opposite issue where they don't delegate at all because they're afraid
Right.
to.
Absolutely.
Right.
So Emily mentioned that you had hired, I think it was 30 VAs. So give us some hot tips on hiring VAs, getting some help.
Yeah. I've got a bunch. So yeah, over the years, I've hired a bunch of VAs. I've, fired all but a handful at this point, right? Because a lot of them just don't work out. So the best tip I can give I call it the banana trick. And that is when you're posting a job posting for a virtual assistant. I like to post on onlinejobs.ph, which is essentially, it's a Filipino job board. So it's where Filipino folks go to find virtual jobs. And the banana trick is when you post your job posting, especially if it's an Amazon related job, you're going to get 200, 250 applications, right? Now, the issue is that most of the folks that are applying are either totally unqualified or they just didn't read your job posting. So what I like to do is I like to slip a sentence midway through the job posting, like mid paragraph, like insert it into a random paragraph that says, if you've read this far into the job posting, then include the word banana in the subject line of your reply. And then their job posting like continues on. So the idea is I'm only going to respond to candidates that put banana in the subject line because they've actually taken the time to read the posting, to craft a response, and to, express interest in that role. And what I found is that almost every single time that eliminates 80% of candidates. So if you've got 200 people that are applying, now you only have to look at 40. And of those 40, another disqualifier that I'll put in the job posting is to send me a 30-second voice sample explaining why you're the best fit for the job and send a screenshot of your internet speed. Because one, I want to understand how good is their English. Can they concisely convey why they're a good fit for the job? And then two, if their internet sucks, then they could be the best VA in the world, right? But they're not going to be very useful. So of those 40 that include banana, there's another probably 10 to 15 that don't include the speed, the screenshot of the internet speed and or the voice sample. So then now you're down to 20 to 25 people that are actually qualified, that have made it through your funnel, that you can then review their resume, request interviews, and then take it from there.
I love that. That is so smart. I think that's the biggest problem that we have. Well, number one, you're like over here and we're not even on the field. Okay. So we
No,
should
give yourself more credit than that because you've been in the business for a long time too. So no, you guys definitely are.
But between us, we have like 100 kids. So I think that's
Yeah,
our
that's my advantage is I don't. So at least for now.
when you said what's your bottleneck? It's our
Nah.
children.
Yeah, I get that.
I always tell Jen, if I started this before I had kids, I would be like on top of the world.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I totally acknowledge the fact that, it sounds bad, but like it is an advantage for me that I don't, at least yet.
Yeah.
So I'm able to move a lot quicker and, work longer, work throughout the day when people who do have them probably don't have that luxury. So trying to take advantage of that advantage, I guess, while I can.
Right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I love that you share all of your steps. So many people gatekeep, like they're like, oh yeah, I do it all. And you think on social media you're competing against somebody who's doing it all, and you're like, why can't I get my life together? And then you find out they have a ton of VAs and they don't even do the prep and on and on. So I like that you are so successful because of your team and you acknowledge that. I love that because like that's one of the big things that's probably separate us from like scaling and growing, and most people from growth is you just get to a place and then you tap out. Like you don't have the energy, the
Right.
brain power anymore, and you have to bring in people. Um and like as far as your growth, like when were you starting to think, okay, I need to start bringing in VAs to help out and bring in a team? Like how did that transition from just you to a bigger team?
Yeah, so it's funny. I remember these dates so vividly. I like can't even remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but I remember like the exact day and month that I started wholesale. So I started my wholesale business, I think it was January 6th of 2019. And the reason I remember the date is because that's the day that like we filed the LLC. And so I remember it's January of 2019. I just transitioned from doing books at thrift stores to doing arbitrage. Now I'm starting to do wholesale. And I had a full-time job, right? I was working in corporate for IBM. The beauty of that job is I didn't have a lot of responsibilities at the time. I was in sales training for the first year and a half of my career. And to be honest, I didn't really have a whole lot to do every day. So I had a ton of time on my hands. And I started researching brands and reaching out directly to brands. Now, I made the mistake of thinking, well, oh, I'll just hire a VA to do this, even though I don't really know how to do this myself, which makes no sense because, again, time wasn't a bottleneck, right? I didn't really have a bottleneck yet. So I didn't really have a reason to outsource. So what I did is I went onto a website called FreeUp, which is essentially a virtual assistant marketplace where the VAs come pre-trained. And so I go on FreeUp. I hired a VA that was supposedly an Amazon expert. And this is how poor of a leader slash manager I was at the time. I gave them some YouTube videos that Dylan Carter had recorded. You guys probably know him as being the founder of Aura. He was the only, actually one of two people putting out wholesale content at the time back in the day. So I was like, hey, VA, go watch some of Dylan Carter's videos and then just copy what he does and then like send me the leads. And shocker to hear that didn't really work too well. So I fired that VA and then I'm like, all right, this isn't going to work. I've got to kind of learn this process better myself and put some systems in place. And then it wasn't until the end of 2019 when I second time around hired another VA. She was good for about a month or two, but then the performance started falling off. And that was when I met Griselda because I had actually interviewed Griselda for a previous VA role. I didn't end up hiring her, but she's the only to this day, right? 5.5 years later, she's the only VA that's actually followed up with me after I told her she didn't have the job. She reached out to me about a month later and said, hey, I know you said I wasn't a good fit, but I just wanted to see if there was an opportunity. And I was like, oh, well, actually, I just had to let go of the VA that I hired over you. So yeah, sure, I'll give you a shot. And so gave her that shot, and she's been an awesome, awesome team member ever since. So that was kind of my, I guess, journey, that first year of like failing with the VA, kind of finding some success with the second one about 6 months later. Then that really didn't work out. And then really landing on one that was a perfect fit.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is. So how did you get your start into wholesale? Like, I know you said you were selling books, but what was the deciding factor? Because I think a lot of us are on the like fence of like, okay, RAOA is great, but how do I scale this? And then, okay, I think I've scaled this to as far as I can. What's next? And I know people always say wholesale, but then like with everything that comes with wholesale, I think it's scary, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. So really the impetus for me making the switch was so late 2018. I was doing arbitrage. I'd been doing arbitrage for about a year-ish at that point. And, I was making side income doing it, but it wasn't really anything significant. And I was planning to quit Amazon altogether. I was like, this has been fun. I've learned a good bit, made a few $100, couple of grand, if that. Maybe it's time to do something else. But again, I don't know how I remember these dates, but it was October of 2018. I actually talked to one of my buddies who now is a very, very successful entrepreneur. He lives here in Charlotte, actually near me. And I was picking his brain. I'm like, hey man, I've been doing this Amazon thing. I think I'm going to kind of give it up. Should I push through it? Kind of, what's your thoughts? And he was like, well, this is kind of the point that you're at where 95% of people tend to throw in the towel. And he's like, and you choose to do that, it's not, it's on you. It's not really a big deal. Maybe there's a better opportunity, but keep in mind that the people that push past this point are usually the ones that end up having success. And I just remember that conversation really stuck with me. And it was like a throwaway conversation for him. I brought it up to him like a year ago, and he's like, yeah, I think I remember that. And I was like, well, that's like burned into my brain. And so really after that conversation with him is when I decided to push through. And right around that time, I discovered Larry Labarsky, who's his YouTube handle and his Instagram is Watch Me Amazon. And so Larry and Dylan were the only two people at the time that I knew of that were putting out wholesale content. And Larry had this one video. It's on his channel. You can find it. It's, at this point, it's 6 years old, 7 years old, but it's him screen sharing a Google Doc where he just breaks down the numbers and how wholesale works. So he's like, well, hey, if you start off with, say, $5,000 in capital and you spend all that on good inventory and you sell through it within, 30, 60 days, that 5,000, you're going to get 6,000 back, for example, right? You take that 6,000, you spend that, then you get, say, 7,500 back. And then he kind of just illustrated the compounding effect that this business model could provide. And that was just a light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh, wow, this wholesale is really, really has more compounding opportunity in my mind than arbitrage does. And the fact that wholesale is a relationship business, it really is a B2B sales business at the end of the day. And at the time, I was in B2B sales. That was my job. I was selling data storage for IBM, one of the biggest, B2B companies in the world. And that's my skill set. So it just kind of clicked. I'm like, oh, maybe this is what I should be focusing on, right? And I'm a sicko and I don't mind making cold calls. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like let's start cold calling these brands. This will be fun. And that's what I did. I remember every day for the first few months, I'd sit down and make a list of, I think I'd find like 20, 25, 30 new brands per day that whatever my criteria was at the time, I don't even know what it was, that I felt were qualified. And then I just called down the list and, stumbled over my pitch, sounded dumb, had no idea what I was talking about, but eventually landed that first account. And, we could go into that. We could go a bunch of different directions, but that's kind of what made me want to take the switch from arbitrage over to wholesale.
It's interesting that you love cold calling so much.
Yeah.
Like, what trauma did you experience as a child
Yeah.
that gave you the ability? Like, I don't get that at all.
Yeah. Well, I have so much experience with cold calling. Like I've, no exaggeration, made 10, 15,000 cold calls. Like seriously, no exaggeration. When I was in high school, I cold called on behalf of many different businesses that I started. I remember at one point I had a business, I'd convert old VHS tapes to DVDs, right? So I did that for like 10 years, kind of on the side. And at one point, I don't remember if it was in high school or if it was like summer breaks during college, but I got the bright idea to grab our church directory and just call down the directory and be like, oh, these are like older people for the most part. So they probably have a bunch of these old home movies.
Wow.
And it's more of a warm call because it's like, hey, it's Corey from church. So they're not just going to be like, F you and hang up.
Yeah.
So I would call down that list. And then at one point, I think it was my senior year of high school, my two cousins and I, we started like a web development business where we were just basically outsourcing website creation to India. And at some point I found this directory of, I think it was like, I don't know how this website existed, but it was a directory of every LLC in North Carolina with like owner name and phone number. And it was like a government website. So it was freely available. And I remember I just started at the A's and just started calling down the list and did that a bunch. And so, yeah, I just made a bunch of calls over the years. And then at IBM, same thing. My manager did in no way, shape, or form gave me any guidance. She was actually a terrible manager because she's like, oh, here's a list, just call them. And that's just not how like high level B2B tech sales works. It's just not. It's relationship based. You don't get in the door with like a Takeda Pharmaceutical cold calling the CIO. But I didn't know any better. So I, each day, I think my goal was like 100 dials, talk to 20, 25, 30 people, no idea what I was talking about. And it was just, I don't know. So I guess I've just built that muscle over the years.
Wow. That is insane. And, I find that interesting because that's, I think, probably the biggest pain point for seller scaling is they don't want to make the call. They don't want to make that connection. And you said something I've heard you say it before on our podcast when I was on yours is like this business is relational. Like
Yep.
you are in relationship here. And we kind of approach it as a transaction.
Yep.
And it doesn't work then, especially with people who don't have personalities, who aren't showing up with their A game. How did you kind of get over it? Doesn't sound like you had that fear. So I don't think I can make you squirm today, because if you're doing 10,000 cold calls, what am I going to ask you? Like nothing.
Well, you can try your best. Like I said, I'm an open book, so I'll answer just about any question. But I mean, that you made a good point, right? It is relationship based, and I think the biggest roadblock that people have in making the transition from arbitrage to wholesale is arbitrage is very transactional by nature, because you're not dealing with another human being. You're either
Right.
ordering off a website, or best case, if you look at arbitrage, like the only way arbitrage can really be relationship based, which personally I think is the best way to do arbitrage, is if you're doing retail arbitrage and you're forming relationships with the store managers. I know people that crush it with retail arbitrage because they have befriended the manager at Walmart or the manager at Target or wherever, and they will text them when they have deals coming in, or text them to come clean out the back room. So people that take that approach, I think, have a much easier transition to wholesale. But the bottleneck for most people is they're just used to sitting behind a screen and just pressing add to cart and place order. And now they've actually got to talk to another person and follow up and build a relationship and overcome objections and be a salesperson, right? So it's a different mindset. It's really just different actions that you have to take.
So what does your script look like when you're calling? Do you have like a generic kind of play by play?
Yeah, so every time I call, and it differs slightly whether you're calling a brand or a distributor, but it's pretty similar for the opening line. So I just like to say, "Hey, my name's Corey. I own a retail business here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I see you guys have product X, Y, and Z. I love those products. I'm actually looking at ordering, 100 units of this one, 70 of this one, 70 of this one, and I was hoping I could talk to somebody in sales there about getting set up as a new dealer." Right? It's that simple. So
Mm.
the key is to be as specific as possible and name specific products and specific quantities. Those are the two things you want to do to really separate yourself from the pack, because when they get cold calls from Amazon sellers, usually right off the bat they can tell that you're an Amazon seller, because the pitch is something like, "Hey, I want to open a wholesale account." And they're like, "Okay, well, first of all, what's your name? Where are you located? What do you want to buy? How long have you been in business?" And immediately their red flags go up and they're hitting you with 20 questions, and you're just not positioning yourself as a serious buyer when you take that approach.
Mm. That's smart. What have you had any like really terrible, awkward situations where you're like, how did I get here? It's memorable.
You mean like with a conversation with a supplier?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've
Nothing
had I've had
else.
so many of them be just rude over the years. Because I mean, naturally, when you make thousands of calls, you're going to have people that are really rude. And I remember there was one guy, I vividly remember this. This is when I was living in Raleigh, so this would have been probably back in 2020. I called this brand owner, and he was just like, right off the bat, I was like, "Hey, love your product, interested in product XYZ." And he's like, "Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, we're a retail business." And he's like, "Well, how much do you sell per year?" And I was like, "Oh, 1.3 million or whatever we were doing at the time." He's like, "Oh yeah, that's nothing." Like, and then he starts like cursing. He's like, why are you calling me?" I'm just like, "Dude, what? Like, do you treat all your customers like this?" And so it's that variation of that conversation probably 20 to 30 times over the years. In
Mm.
fact, I had one recently. So I've got my YouTube here on my little name tag, but I did a YouTube series back, I guess this was beginning of this year, where I started a new wholesale business from scratch over 60 days. And so the whole series is pretty much me cold calling brands and cold calling distributors. And there's one in particular, the brand is named Whiteside. And I remember them vividly because they were one of the first brands I cold called back in 2019. And it's funny because what they told me in 2019 was the same thing they told, is the same guy, same conversation, same demeanor. The guy was an absolute jerk. And that call is recorded. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on one of the from scratch episodes. There's 4 of them. So if people want to get a feel for what some of those conversations can look like, that's a good one. And he didn't curse at me or anything, but he's just, very condescending, very belittling. And I'm like, well, hey, you're in Whiteville, North Carolina. You're not too far from me. I'd love to come in, meet the team, see what you guys are all about. And he's basically like, no. So I'm like, okay.
Love that. And
Yeah.
you've worked with so many people helping them get through all these steps and like ease their way into wholesale. Do you, I mean, this is just like a personal question. Do you find that it's harder for men versus women, or they're treated differently, or if there's any differences between like if a woman cold calls versus a man?
So that's a good question. I personally haven't really noticed a difference. I personally think that a woman making cold calls that's confident and that has a good pitch is probably at an advantage just because it's rare, right? Most of the people in this industry, right? Like we were Emily, you and I were both at Miami Seller Conference back, a month or two ago. And you walk into that room and it's all like 20-year-old dudes, which is great. But with that said, I think women who do this and who do this at a high level are in the minority, which makes them more effective. That's just my opinion.
I love that take. So if you're watching, my audience is mostly female. If you're watching us, you can do this.
Yep.
And like, honestly, if a man can do it, you can do it.
Yes, actually,
Right?
yeah. I mean,
Like,
and take Kate for example, right? I mentioned she's my right hand. She's on my team. She's doing wholesale in Canada. She's selling on Amazon up in Canada, and she landed a really solid brand direct deal. Literally, just calling the brand and having a conversation with, I think it was the sales manager, and it's just a human to human conversation.
yeah,
I think that's what people need to realize is that
right.
we're not, and the beauty of it too is when you're calling these suppliers, we are not calling them asking them to give us money. We're calling them, telling them we want to give them our money. So yes, it's a cold call, but it's so much easier to be like, hey, by the way, I want to give you $2,000 for your products, instead of saying, hey, you should, pay me $2,000 for my products.
Right. Right. I love that. And Kate is going to be on a future podcast episode, guys. If you're like,
Yeah,
who
she
is this
said.
lady? She's coming. So, where can people find you? Like, what options are available for people who want to connect, want to jump into wholesale? Give us all the details.
Yeah, so I would recommend people go to wholesaleaccelerator.io. So that is our school community that we have. It's geared towards people who are newer to wholesale. So when people go to look at the school community, it's at a very low price point. And the idea is we want to give people a 3-week roadmap day by day. So that's one of the things that we do in school is basically like, hey, day 1, do these 2 things. Day 2, do these 3 things. So we lay it out day by day. And we're there for support as well. So I'm in there answering every single question. There's no question goes unanswered. And we're in there hanging out and having a good time. So that's where I'd recommend people go.
Okay. And we'll post all the links for everybody. And can you tell the audience why you haven't started selling on Walmart yet? Like, what is the holdup?
Yeah. I mean, really, it's bandwidth, right? So it's one of those things that I know I should do. I know I need to do it. I see you doing it. Everybody seems to be doing it. But it's been low on the priority list, and I know it shouldn't be. So it's my fault. I've been dragging my feet.
I appreciate you taking the responsibility there. What is something on social media, like a style of reel in the seller community, that is like you're done with? You hate when you see it. And you can name names.
Let's
That's
see.
okay.
Style of reel. I feel like a lot of the ones I'm seeing in the FBA space aren't, I don't know. Like I feel like I don't even follow a lot of sellers who are putting out like Amazon specific content. Maybe it's the ones that are just, I don't love the reels that are very like educational, right? Because I think they're boring. So when people are like, hey, do this, do XYZ, and it's not very entertaining, those are the ones that I don't like. But the ones I do like, I don't remember who I saw doing this, but the guy was like driving his Tesla, and the idea was like, hey, this is how easy it is to call a wholesale supplier. And he's literally, the Tesla is driving itself. He's got the phone on speakerphone, and he's like, hey, my name's so-and-so, I want to open a wholesale account. And they're like, okay, great. And he was like, see, that easy, right?
Yeah.
So that's one that I like. But the like straight educational that's not entertaining, I'm guilty of that, and they never perform well. So I
Yeah,
don't like those.
that's brands. Brands are doing their own content because they think they know best, and then they
Oh,
like
and it sucks.
have
And like
this like
nobody engages.
close to their face situation. I know, I see that too. Okay, well, not like I can't gossip off that, so that's like a mid answer, but that's okay.
Yeah, you put me on the spot there. Well, yeah. I mean, and the other one I would say too is maybe like podcast clips that are low quality, right? Just it's like why even post it? Because I personally think it makes you look bad, even if it's a good clip, even if it's a good take. If you've got a blurry background or you're recording on like a Windows 95 computer, it just doesn't look good.
It does look good. Okay. All right. I appreciate the tip. That's a good one. Thank you for being here today, Corey. We will post all of your links below. Connect with Corey on social media, all the platforms. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. I'd say specifically YouTube, just because that's where I've got the most actionable content and long form. I think like we might be over 1,000 total videos at this point, including shorts. But
Wow.
that's where I'd go. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Until next time, thank you for being here. Have a great one. Talk soon. Bye.